General Hospital spoilers reveal that Nina is slowly spiraling into a complex emotional maze, where every move she makes is driven by a deep yearning to be called Mother, a title she lost before she ever had the chance to hold Willow in her arms with unconditional love. From the moment she learned Willow was her biological daughter, Nina has wrestled with herself, torn between regret over the past and a desperate desire to make things right at any cost. But instead of allowing time, sincerity, and patience to mend the past, Nina let fear of losing her child, insecurity about her place in Willow's life, and wounded pride guide her. That's when she made a grave mistake, one not only strategic in nature but also revealing a darker side of a woman who had once been abandoned, forgotten, and is now terrified to her core at the thought of being rejected again by her only daughter. When Nina conspired with Portia to stage a scheme to completely destroy Willow's trust in Drew, she believed she was doing the right thing. She convinced herself that Drew was dangerous, that his political ambitions and shady connections could hurt Willow, and that if Willow realized this, she would turn to the only person who truly wanted to protect her, her birth mother. What Nina didn't understand was that love cannot be manipulated with shocks, manufactured disruptions, or intricately staged lies. She brought Jacinda, a professional escort, into Drew's life not just as a tool, but as a live pawn, carefully programmed to fracture Drew and Willow's relationship. But things spiraled out of control. Jacinda not only hinted at a compromising situation, she directly caused an incident where Drew was drugged, with toxicology reports to prove it, leading to a media storm and a temporary collapse of trust. The problem was, Willow didn't react the way Nina had imagined. She didn't scream or immediately point fingers. Instead, she grew quiet, contemplative, and began questioning, not Drew, but herself and those around her, including Nina. When she asked Nina if she was foolish to trust Drew, it wasn't rhetorical. It was a moment of deep introspection, hinting at a bigger question: did the doubt truly come from Drew? Or was it planted by someone manipulating her emotions from behind the scenes? Nina was no longer a mother trying to protect, but now seen as a manipulative liar, destroying everything she had built through tearful efforts. Ironically, her impulsiveness and impatience became the very reasons she lost her most precious opportunity, the trust of the daughter for whom she had sacrificed her reputation and love. Willow, who had been deeply wounded by lies and by people who promised to stay but vanished, had embarked on a path of forgiveness not because Nina deserved it, but because Willow believed in the healing power of grace. But now, as the truth behind the scheme with Jacinda unravels, Willow feels not only betrayed but once again reduced to a pawn in someone else's game, even if that someone is her biological mother. Deep down, Nina never meant to hurt Willow. All she ever wanted was closeness, a connection, to feel that after years of wandering and mistakes, she could still find family. But the path she chose, one of schemes, calculation, and a deep fear of rejection, turned that hope into a fresh emotional tragedy. Willow no longer sees the mother she had longed for, warm, forgiving, patient. She now sees a woman willing to sacrifice truth for control. And that pushes them further apart, perhaps to the breaking point. In the moment Nina watches Willow leave the hospital room with Drew, not in anger or tears, but in quiet strength, she begins to understand the true cost. It's no longer about being exposed, going public, or even facing legal consequences. The most painful part is realizing she could lose Willow not because of others, but because her own hands destroyed the last chance to be loved genuinely. And now, a single question echoes within her: how do you mend a heart that no longer believes in you? But sometimes, that question has no answer, because love cannot be earned through schemes. It comes only to those patient enough to wait, and sincere enough not to force it. Nina failed to do that. And for that reason, this time, the price may not just be failure, but losing forever the thing she loves most. Nina's story is reaching a dangerous turning point, as all the plans she once held onto for reclaiming a place in Willow's heart are falling apart. Her flawed approach, especially her alliance with Portia to trap Drew, has not only backfired but has left Nina completely isolated. Willow is withdrawing further, Drew is regaining trust, And the public in Port Charles is starting to look at Nina with suspicion. Even her once silent allies are turning away. In desperation, Nina realizes that if she wants to salvage what little remains of the relationships she once valued, especially with her family, she must act decisively and boldly. And her biggest decision is this: to leave Port Charles and travel to Germany to find Michael. In Nina's mind, Michael is the last key that could reopen the door to Willow. He holds the strongest influence over both Willow's heart and judgment. Nina knows that only by convincing Michael, or at least laying the truth bare before him, can she hope to shift the narrative. But this choice carries enormous risk. If Michael rejects her, if he exposes her, Nina won't just lose Willow, she'll lose everything. This is no longer a journey of reconciliation. It's a final gamble from a mother quietly crumbling under the weight of panic. Her move to Germany is not just a trip, it's the beginning of a new cascade of consequences, forming silently beneath the surface. While Port Charles reels from the fallout of the Jacinda investigation, Nina, the central figure, has pulled away from the epicenter to face the one man holding all the cards. But Michael is no longer easy to sway. He's seen everything: Willow's pain, Nina's manipulation, and the collapse of the family values he once fought to protect. Now, Nina stands before him for one reason: to speak the truth, but it's a truth carefully chosen and self-justified. In this encounter, a new disaster begins to stir. If Nina cannot control her emotions, if she lets resentment, guilt, or manipulation leak through, Michael won't just turn his back. He might sever every remaining tie between Nina and the Corinthos family. That would make Nina a total outcast, by blood and by honor. But if, by some miracle, she succeeds, if she can genuinely move Michael's heart, if she can make him question his stance on the mother of the woman he loves, then maybe there's still an escape from the crisis tightening around Nina with pressure from the public, the law, and her own conscience. Meanwhile, back in Port Charles, Nina's departure creates a temporary power vacuum. Rivals like Carly and Portia are already discussing their next moves. Even Drew, still mired in scandal, sees her absence as an opportunity to strike back, clear his name, and expose the entire scheme. This makes the local situation more chaotic than ever, and places even more pressure on Nina, who is desperately hoping this trip can turn the tide. But she forgets one thing: sometimes absence at a critical moment is proof of guilt. And that is pushing her closer to the edge of public condemnation, judgment, and consequences that cannot be undone. This trip to Germany is not just a last-ditch effort to win back Willow's heart through Michael. It's the first wave in a chain reaction that Nina will be powerless to stop if things don't go her way. Every word, every expression in her meeting with Michael could turn into a blade, used against her if he chooses to reveal everything. And in a cruel twist of fate, just when Nina believes she's regaining control, everything is slipping through her fingers. This is a disaster not marked by flames or gunfire, but by the silence that falls when trust shatters for the last time, and never returns. Despite the deep resentment he still harbors toward Nina, for everything she has done in the past. From sabotaging his and Willow's lives to her dark schemes aimed at manipulating emotions and consolidating power, Michael now finds himself in a cruelly ironic situation. His personal hatred is no longer a standalone emotion, but something gradually being pulled into the tangled webs of politics and family dysfunction. While Nina has traveled all the way to Germany to see him, desperate to salvage what remains of her connection to Willow, Michael is caught in a storm of inner conflict. He is not someone who forgives easily, yet he can't ignore the fact that Nina is still Willow's biological mother, and the legal grandmother of his children. This inescapable truth reopens issues he thought were buried, reviving emotional ties that are far more complicated than he's willing to admit. But the real chaos begins when Michael realizes that what he's facing is no longer just an emotional entanglement. It's become a strategic game unfolding in the shadows. Nina has come to Germany not only with regret and a plea for redemption, but also with documents, information, and explanations, tools that, if used wisely, could turn the entire power dynamic in Port Charles upside down. Reluctantly, Michael finds that some of what Nina says forces him to pause and think. Her words carry no fake tears. No familiar justifications, only specific, unsettling details about Portia, Jacinda, and the true nature of the scheme to entrap Drew, one that Nina herself may not have fully controlled. A new shock begins to form, not from the outside, but within Michael's own mind. He starts to question whether he's been viewing everything through a lens clouded by emotion. Has his hatred for Nina blinded him to other, more dangerous forces, threats that both he and Willow may already be entangled in without knowing it? Even more alarming is the possibility that Nina might be right, at least in part. That would mean there's a deeper conspiracy at play. One that has been manipulating them all like pawns in a blood-soaked drama. At the same time, the fragments Nina reveals ignite painful memories within Michael, memories of Morgan's death. Of the repeated fractures in his family caused by secrets and betrayal. He doesn't want his children to grow up in a world like that, where relationships are games and love exists only if it serves a bigger plan. It's in this context that Michael confronts Nina. No longer just an angry son, but as a guardian of moral legacy and emotional security for the next generation of the Corinthos family. And in that role, he knows he must make decisions based not on emotion, but on logic, even if it means painful consequences for everyone involved, including himself. And so, a new calculation begins to take form. Michael knows he's standing at a crossroads. Either he forgives Nina, preserving some shred of humanity in the midst of this cycle of hatred. Or he uses the information she's given him to further the power game, eliminating threats like Drew, Portia, and others who may be manipulating him and Willow from behind the scenes. But the cost of each choice is high. And from this grows a new fear, that no matter which path he takes, he may end up losing either himself, or the people he loves most. This is no longer just a story about love and hate. It has become a tragedy of trust, responsibility, and a bitter truth, sometimes. Forgiveness frees no one, but holding on to hatred only creates deeper, darker abysses with no way back. Michael is standing at such a turning point now. And every breath he takes from here on could be the signal for a looming disaster, not from Nina, but from the fracture forming in his own mind. As Michael nears the final days of his harrowing treatment in Germany, he's not just recovering from physical injuries, but grappling with invisible wounds born of betrayal, deception, and loss. His physical recovery has progressed faster than expected, but that progress has stirred up unresolved inner turmoil. Each time he sits by the hospital window, gazing out at the cold skies, Michael finds himself surrounded by questions without answers. Who is truly on his side? Who orchestrated the schemes that have disrupted his and Willow's lives? And most crucially, who can he trust in a world where loyalty is traded for political advantage, and emotions are exploited as tools? When doctors inform him that he may be discharged earlier than expected, he doesn't feel relief. Instead, a weight begins to press on his shoulders, the burden of returning to a place that's no longer whole. He won't just return as a recovering patient. He will return to confront the shattered remains left behind in Port Charles, where former allies may now be suspects in a string of dark machinations. And the first person who comes to mind is none other than Drew, a man Michael once trusted, empowered, and regarded as a brother. Michael knows that since his hospitalization, a series of events has unfolded. Jacinda, a name previously unknown to him, has become central to a scandal involving a sexual entrapment scheme and drugging plot against Drew. But as the truth unravels, Michael begins to spot inconsistencies, details only someone with an outside, clear perspective could see. From Portia's sudden silence to Nina's unexpected trip to Germany. All the pieces are starting to align, waiting for Michael to connect them into a complete picture. And when early evidence hints that Drew may have known, or worse, been complicit in, the scheme for his own political gain, Michael is overcome by an unnameable feeling. It's not just disappointment. It's the sickening realization that he may have been positioned on a chessboard by someone he once trusted most. Michael is no longer just a man who cares about family. He has witnessed Morgan's death, the breakdown of Carly and Sonny, and Willow's heartbreak at the hands of those she once called family. And now, with a heart seemingly healed after treatment, He carries a new burden, the conviction that if he doesn't act, history will repeat itself, perhaps in a worse form. He can't allow Drew to continue wielding influence in Port Charles if these allegations prove true. And if they are, Michael knows he must do the hardest thing of all. Put Drew through the very whirlwind he once unleashed on others. But the storm doesn't end with Drew. Michael's return will shift the balance of power in Port Charles. With Sonny losing his grip, Nina isolated by her failed schemes, and Carly stepping back, Michael, quiet and calculating, emerges as the one capable of either detonating everything or rebuilding from the ashes. Those plotting to use Drew as a power tool are now growing anxious. Because Michael doesn't just have information. He has the public's trust, the backing of the Corinthos Quartermain legacy. And most importantly, an unshakable motive, to protect Willow and his children at all costs. And so, as he rises from his hospital bed, no one can say for certain what comes next. But one thing is clear, a political, emotional, and familial earthquake is on the verge of erupting in Port Charles. At the eye of that storm stands Michael, once wounded, now ready to strike back. Not with rage, but with cold calculation and unrelenting precision. Drew will run out of time to cover his tracks. Nina will run out of places to hide. And Portia will be forced to face the truths she thought were buried forever. Every step Michael takes is a warning bell, and when it rings, Port Charles will never be the same again. After months of conflict and seething hatred toward Nina, Carly shocked all of Port Charles with a stunning move. She granted Nina a significant privilege, an unexpected concession from the very woman who once vowed she would never forgive. This decision not only left Carly's closest allies confused and unsettled, but it also reshaped the delicate balance of alliances simmering beneath the surface of the city. Carly's move wasn't born out of weakness or sudden forgiveness. Rather, she had come to understand that sometimes, keeping an enemy close is the sharpest strategic move one can make. In a city where power is often traded for silence or information, Carly knew that granting the right favor at the right moment could control the outcome of an entire war. The privilege she gave Nina wasn't just symbolic, it was a lifeline. An opening that allowed Nina to escape the suffocating isolation she had fallen into, especially after her humiliating failure in the scheme with Portia to drive a wedge between Drew and Willow. This change of direction hit Nina like a jolt, forcing her to reevaluate her place, not as a rejected mother or a desperate woman seeking redemption, but as a pawn being played in a much larger game that Carly was now controlling. This realization threw Nina into a psychological tailspin. Torn between gratitude and the creeping fear that everything was slipping beyond her control. Carly's decision marked a recalibration in the power structure of Port Charles. Those who believed she would continue dismantling Nina at every opportunity were now faced with a new reality. Carly was no longer fighting for revenge, she was fighting to secure the future. With this move, she armed herself with a powerful weapon, Nina's conditional neutrality. Nina, the woman responsible for immeasurable damage to Carly's family, was now forced to walk a razor's edge, where every step could lead to redemption, or complete annihilation if she ever betrayed them again. To outside observers, this shift wasn't merely a moment of reconciliation. It was the ignition point for a new wave of calculated chaos, where relationships were no longer shaped by emotion, but by necessity. Carly wasn't acting out of familial bonds, she was acting out of strategy. She knew that a Nina who owed her would be easier to control than a defeated but unbound Nina. And this realization is beginning to haunt Nina. She can't tell whether she's being given a chance to rebuild her life, or being pulled into a deeper web of control she's powerless to resist. This change also forces others in Port Charles, Sonny, Drew, even Willow, to reassess everything they thought they knew about both women. Is Nina truly changing? Has Carly really forgiven her? Or is it all a carefully constructed facade masking even deeper schemes? In a Port Charles increasingly tense with hidden agendas and shifting loyalties, Carly's decision isn't merely an act of grace, it's the opening salvo in a chain of escalating upheavals. And with every step Nina takes from this point forward, she will be haunted by a single question: is this a second chance, or the door to her downfall? The story has now entered a phase where the lines between enemy and ally are no longer clear. Carly may have opened the path, but it is Nina who must choose, to walk forward in the fragile light of renewed trust, or to lose herself in the darkness she helped create. And all the while, Port Charles will be watching, not to cheer her on, but to brace itself for the next shockwave, as change ceases to be rumor and becomes undeniable reality.